So in all the previous modules, one of the things we've really been kind of trying to discuss is the idea of using models or theories to help us guide in the process of identifying where problems are within an organization, how those problems might affect other parts of the organization, and how can we come up with solutions to those problems. And generally speaking, when we're talking about problems in organizations, we're talking about metrics that organizations care about. And that includes turnover and retention, so basically maintaining and holding on to valuable human resources. And that's where a lot of organizational behavior occurs because we know that if you're looking to keep workers engaged, keep workers productive, and keep workers retaining to your organization and committed to your organization, you also need to make sure that you are giving them rewards they value, that they enjoy working and have high job satisfaction. But we've also been talking about a lot of other potential issues that can happen within organizations beyond just that, including productivity, successfulness, and basically profitability. And we're going to end on organizational structure and design because it is important to consider how an organization is designed. What is the way to kind of conceptualize that design and the organization structure, because that also gives us additional information in determining where a problem is and how to actually address that problem. So if you'll remember in our very first modules, we discussed the open systems model, the idea that all organizations are effectively a dynamic structure. They take in resources from outside their environment. They do something to those resources in some way to make them profitable. In other words, they change them, whether it's ideas being generated, whether it's raw materials being made into products, and then it sells those products. And then based on the feedback of the environment, both its customers, the people that are coming into the organization, and even laws and regulations and cultural expectations may change or determine, again, what resources it takes in, what throughputs occur to create products at the end. So when we're talking about organizational structure and design, we're talking about within the organization itself. We're talking about the throughputs. When something comes into an organization, once it's there, what's the structure of the process of whatever the organization does? So some basic concepts as we kind of walk through this idea of how we conceptualize any organization based on its structure is, of course, the definition for organizational structure, the formal configuration between individuals and groups with respect to the allocations of tasks, responsibilities, and authority within the organization. So that is a very abstract concept. We're talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about formal configuration. So what is the official reporting structure of the organization? What types of individuals or groups or teams are within the organization? How are tasks, responsibilities basically assigned, and the expectations for the various individuals and teams in that organization? And also, what is the authority structure within that organization? One of the ways we try to make this less abstract is with an organizational chart, a diagram representing the connection between the various departments and authority structures within an organization, a graphic representation of the organizational structure or design. So we're mainly going to be focusing on the organizational chart and the elements of that organizational chart, because that organizational chart is what's going to give us that roadmap, if you will, of what's happening in an organization to allow us to think about how do our various psychological interventions fit within the throughput or the inside of the organization. So this is an example of a fairly straightforward and simple organizational chart. There's board members at the top that feed into the chief executive officer. Off to the side is legal counsel. Underneath the chief executive officer is the president. Underneath the president is 4 vice presidents. And each of those vice presidents, one of sales and marketing, one of human resources, one of production, and one of research and development, has departments under them. So recognize also that this is not a detailed chart. So for example, under the chief executive officer, in the chief executive officer's office might be additional counsels, additional advisors. There may be support staff that are involved with that position as well. And especially as we move past the VP level, the boxes start to represent not individuals, but groups. So for example, under the VP of sales and marketing, industrial product director of sales. But under that person, and again, their staff, is going to be various subgroups. And within those subgroups are, again, going to be additional people. A lot of times you'll also find that if you're asking for a larger organization's organizational chart, you're going to find multiple charts. In other words, you might find a chart like this for a large Fortune 500 company with 50,000 employees, but probably every one of these boxes has their own organizational chart. So there's probably would be an organizational chart for the office of the president. So who are the advisors? Who are the individuals that report to the president? Who are the people that support the president's functions? And those charts are going to become larger and larger as you go along. So for example, in my current organization, I have an organizational chart for my direct work teams, and there's about 40 people on that chart. And it basically shows individually where everyone fits, who reports to who, and who's responsible for what tasks. But that chart actually is a single box, if you will, on the next chart up that shows the greater structure. And that's the greater structure of assessments throughout our global assessments. So I'm in North American assessments. Global assessments is about 250 people. And again, each one of that larger chart for global assessment, so there's going to be one for the Europe, there's going to be one for the Asian countries, there's going to be one for North America, there's going to be one for South America. Each one of those is going to have their own chart, but on the main chart for that larger group, it's going to be a single box. And of course, global assessments is just a smaller part of the larger company that I work for, which again is going to have its own organizational chart. So recognize that we're rarely looking at a single chart that is meant to encompass the entirety of the organization. It depends what level we're at. If we're looking at the overall organization, we want the organizational chart for the entire organization. And it may look something like this, though probably more complex. But if I'm specifically looking at problems within the vice president's office, I would probably want to see the organizational chart for the VP of production. If it's within the actual industrial products or consumer products departments, I might want to see those organizational charts. I'd probably want to see all of them, honestly, all the ones that might be involved in the decisions or the interventions that I might suggest for the organization. So just giving an example of the university that you're at, most universities are somewhat formed like this. There's going to be a presidential chancellor or provost, and that's going to be an office that holds multiple people that are making the final decisions. Now notice I didn't actually put the board of directors, but that's who is above the president, chancellor, and provost. Then every school will have a college dean. Each within the dean or within each school, there'll be multiple departments. So for example, the Department of Psychology might be in the Department of Arts and Sciences. It might be in the Department of Liberal Arts. It really depends on the university. But that's going to be run by a dean with a dean's office. And that dean's office is going to have its own organizational chart. There's going to be associate deans. There's going to be support staff. Then for each actual department, for example, psychology, there's going to be a departmental chair. And the department is going to have its own chart of every faculty member and how it all fits together. There's various committees, and there's probably going to be various assistants to the department chair. Beneath the department chair is going to be the actual faculty, and that in itself is then divided by assistant professors, associate professors, and full professors, and probably also additional adjunct instructors and instructors. Depending on the size of the university, there may be graduate students. And when I put graduate students here, I'm not necessarily implying that graduate students are above undergraduate students. It's simply the fact that many times graduate students are in the chain of command. In other words, graduate students are serving roles as instructors or teaching assistants in various classes, which means that if an undergraduate was needing to address an issue, they would often go through the graduate student first, faculty second, department chair third, and you can start to see how this gives you an idea of how both power but also issues within the organization would be handled. If I was a faculty member needing extra resources or needing to address a concern, I would probably go to my department chair first. If my department chair could not actually solve the problem or needed to bring in someone above them, we'd go to the college dean. If the problem was beyond what the college dean could handle, I'd be going up to the president's office. Likewise, if you had a problem with a class, if there was a graduate student teaching assistant, you might start with the graduate student. If the graduate student was unable to help you, you might then go to the faculty member, and etc. So this kind of gives you that idea of the flow of the organization. Where is authority and what is the process of going through that authority? So there's 5 major building blocks of organizational structure that we want to consider when we're putting together both the chart, but also interpreting the chart. So this is both about how to construct an organizational chart, but also how to identify what that organizational chart tells us about the organization. And these 5 building blocks, which we're going to spend the rest of this module discussing, are the hierarchy of authority. In other words, how is authority or decision making handled within the structure? The division of labor, so how is labor determined, or the expectation of labor for each individual person within the organization? Span of control, so how many people does each decision maker or manager have as direct reports? Whether the positions in the actual organizational chart are line or staff positions and what those differences mean. And finally, is the organization overall centralized versus decentralized? So I would want to think about all 5 of these if I'm creating an organizational chart. So as I'm creating it, I'd want to be thinking about, does the chart show the hierarchy of authority? Does the chart show, at least imply, the divisions of labor? Are I completely and accurately depicting the spans of control? Am I thinking about line versus staff positions? And finally, overall, am I communicating a centralized or decentralized organization? If I'm looking at a pre-existing organizational structure chart, the same questions are applying now. What does the chart tell me about the authority? What does the chart tell me about the divisions of labor, the span of control, the line and staff positions, and whether it's a centralized or decentralized organization? So our first of these 5 building blocks is the hierarchy of authority, a configuration of reporting relationships within an organization. That is, who reports to whom? So the vice presidents report to the president. Does the president report to the CEO? Does the CEO report to the board of executives? And generally how this is going to be communicated in the chart is by those layers. At the lower layers is going to be the least amount of authority, and at the top layers is going to be the highest amount of authority. And as we draw the lines between the various groups, those vertical lines between lower levels and higher levels is also going to be representing basically lines of communication, but also lines of authority. One of the modern trends that we've seen in a lot of organizations is to try to do delayering. And this goes all the way back again to something we talked about early on in this class, the idea of theory X versus theory Y. Theory X is that theory, kind of classical organizational theory, that people will only work if they're highly monitored and a lot of management is necessary to make sure work gets done. So if you have a theory X organizational structure, there's going to be a lot of layers. There's going to be managers watching managers watching managers, and there's going to be direct line supervisors watching everyone that actually does the work. A lot of organizations have found that this is unnecessary levels of management, especially depending on what the organization does. That's not to say that there are not some organizations where a theory X highly layered organization is the most effective tool. As I said, it depends. It really depends on the organization, the people within the organization, and also what the task of the organization is. However, as businesses have become more not intellect, but intelligent, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. I'm going to pause here for a second as I think this through. Basically, intellectual property. That's what I was trying to get to. The idea that a lot of organizations, they're creating ideas, they're creating advertisements, they're creating new research, they're creating new ways of doing things, new technologies. Those often are organizations where you have highly specialized people, even at the lower levels, with lots of training. They're likely to be fairly motivated to do well. And therefore, this kind of theory X model of needing all this management is often inappropriate for such organizations. So as today's organizations restructure, the middle layers of organizational hierarchies tend to be removed. The result is a flatter organizational structure which puts managers close to the issues about which they have to make decisions, reduce waste and quality of decisions. Now the problem, and I'm going to do a little side note here on delayering, is that one of the big motivators that keep people interested in their jobs long term, keep people retained, unwilling to leave organizations, is also a clear path of advancement. So if you're in a theory X organization where there are layers and layers of management at different levels, it's also fairly easy to see how you're going to progress through. In 2 to 5 years, I expect to get to become a manager. In 2 to 5 more years, I expect to get to be a middle level manager. In a few more years, I hope to maybe get a promotion to upper management. If we look at a delayered organization where maybe there's literally the CEO and the vice presidents, one level of management, and then everyone else is actually working, you've also removed a lot of those title increases. In other words, people aren't able to see, where do I go from here? There may be raises and bonuses, but people also like to feel like their career is moving somewhere. So we've actually seen a more modern trend in a lot of these delayered organizations to start trying to basically not change or add layers of management, but to start to come up with new titles within that management. So I'm familiar with one organization, for instance, that took basically their middle level management, which is their main management structure, and there's now manager level 1, level 2, and level 3. They're small differences, and they're all in the same level of management, but a level 3 manager is assumed to be taking on more responsibility with more decision making, and also a small bump in pay in each of these. So where in the past this delayered organization had a single layer of management, once you made it, you were pretty much stuck there for years. There's now again that progression of, if I'm doing well, I know I'm going to get a title change, I'm going to get to advance. It's that perception of advancement. So when we think about delayering organization as a solution, we also need to recognize the bigger picture. What's the implications of delayering organization, and can we create it in such a way that it still is going to be successful? So the next building block 2, is division of labor, the process of dividing between the many tasks performed within an organization into specialized jobs. So highly specialized division of labor would be, example, your job is to do one and one thing only. So for example, if you're in an advertising firm, it might be you write automobile jingles for the radio, or you can tell this is a little dated, but let's assume that you're creating basically the songs that go along with any automobile advertisements, no matter what media they're going into in the marketing department. But you don't write jingles for any other type of product, and you don't do any other kind of ad copy. Your job is to write songs. That would be highly specialized. Not so specialized would be someone that's writing all forms of advertisement: print ads, text ads, jingles, and for all types of products, dealing with all types of clients. And they may also be not just writing, but they might also be involved in other parts of the process of advertising. So a highly specialized division of labor means there's a lot of people working in a very large department, and each person has their specialty. And those specialties are then put together into teams to actually create final products. Not so specialized is where every individual kind of takes on all of the roles. Now you can start to see that there is advantages and disadvantages to both of these. The advantages of the highly specialized is it does let someone get to be very good at one thing, and it also means that you know who to go to exactly if you need something done. The downside is that person may very well burn out. There's not a lot of variety to what they do. The not so specialized means that everyone within the department is capable of doing almost any task that's involved in the department. There's not a lot of specialization. So there's going to be a lot of variety of work. However, it's also no one's really becoming a master of any one thing. There's a lot of jack of all trades, for instance. So again, we have to then match that to the environment itself. So we do have to recognize there is no right answer here. And also on an individual level, there are some individuals that love being highly specialized. I would prefer to do. In fact, I think of other faculty members. I am aware of quite a few faculty members that I've worked with that are incredibly pleased to teach the exact same class every semester in the exact same way for their entire career. In fact, I know faculty members that for 20 plus years have taught the same classes over and over and over again. They are okay with a highly specialized focus, and one would hope they've gotten very, very good at those classes. I myself find that stifling. I teach a lot of different classes for a lot of different universities because I enjoy teaching things different ways. I don't want to be so specialized. In fact, I was known in my previous department when I was a full-time faculty member and a full professor of being the one person that was always willing to jump into a new class if it needed to be taught because I enjoyed teaching new things. But that also meant I never got extremely specialized at any of the things I taught. So again, there's advantages and disadvantages to each of these at an organizational level, and there's a fit advantage and disadvantage depending on the person. So when we talk about division of labor, we can usually look at it as basically low versus high. So, and there's 3 dimensions here. So degree of specialization. So a low specialization means generalized tasks, while a high specialization means highly specialized tasks. What this refers to is that if the task itself requires a strong focus on a set of skills and training in order to do it, you almost have to go with more a high division of labor. In other words, a specialization at that point. If the actual tasks are fairly general, anyone can do them with a little bit of training, it's easier to have a low division of labor. Also, the typical organizational size. The smaller the organization, the more likely you're going to find a low division of labor. Everyone has to take on a lot of different talent, a lot of different tasks in a lot of different ways. The larger the organization, the more specialized it's going to be. And I'm going to again go to my own experiences here. I have worked for small consulting companies in the past. And by small, I mean less than 50 people. Those smaller consulting companies, when I worked for them, I did client interactions, I created interventions, I did statistical work. I had to implement, if we created an assessment process, it was my responsibility to get it added to our systems, to set it up technologically. I had to do all those tasks because there wasn't any specialization. The organization I'm in now, which is still a consulting company, is a Fortune 500 consulting company. I never do statistical analysis anymore. We have a department that does statistical analysis. Once I've chosen and worked on an assessment, I'm not the one putting it onto our virtual platforms or our survey platforms for people to take those surveys. We have a department for that as well. I don't do much sales. We have a sales department. So again, that's an example that as the organization gets bigger, it starts to make sense to let people specialize to some degree. And finally, economic efficiency. Generally speaking, the lower the division of labor in smaller organizations, it's usually less efficient. Having one person that does stats and programming and client interaction and sales all in one role, that means I'm doing a lot of different things. And I'm not getting great at any of them. It doesn't mean that it's inefficient, but it means it's less efficient than a high division of labor. But as I said, there's also a cost to going to a high division of labor as well that we want to think about on an organizational level or an individual psychological level. The next thing, or the block we're going to look at, is block 3, span of control, the number of subordinates in an organization who are supervised by an individual manager. So we're basically looking at the breadth of responsibility. So if there's a manager that's basically, for example, a frontline manager that's watching 50 different individuals as they actually do the tasks of the organization, we would consider that to be a very wide breadth of control. In other words, for every manager, there's an enormous number of people, 50. If the breadth of responsibility was much smaller, for each manager they manage 2 or 3 people, that'd be a much more narrow band. So this really just is what's the reporting structure and how many people is each manager responsible for managing. And again, I've seen a lot of variance in this. Within my own organization, I've seen changes in how we do management. For example, when I first started working here, our breadth of control, our span of control, was actually fairly wide. The person that I directly reported to had about 15 people reporting to them, and that took a lot of their time to be managing those 15 people. We've actually changed that model, and now my manager manages 3 people, and I manage 2 people. So basically, we've actually gone from a more narrow organization to a slightly more hierarchical organization in our structure, which also then changed our span of control. So this is just an example of a tall versus a flat organization. So the taller the organization, usually the smaller the span of control. In other words, the more that managers are managing managers are managing managers are managing the people that are working. So again, we have these levels. A flatter organization, each manager is going to be responsible for a far larger number of people. And really what you have to ask yourself here is how much management is needed. If there is a lot of management time required to get the work done efficiently, you probably want a taller organization. Each manager is going to spend a fair amount of time working with their direct reports, and if they are, they need that span of control. They need to be having less people they report to. The more that you have workers that are actually self-motivated and know what they're doing and basically just need managers to occasionally clear roadblocks out of their way, the more that a flat organization is going to make sense. And that's kind of what was being considered back and forth in my own organization. The original idea was a much more flatter organization until the realization occurred, yes, we have highly motivated people, but a lot of times because they're working with all these other specialized people on teams, they do need management input and management control to help them get things done. And therefore, we've moved to honestly a slightly taller organizational structure. Number 4 is basically just decision makers versus advisors. So line positions are positions in organizations in which people can make decisions related to doing its basic work. So basically, you are in a line position if you report to someone and you're either working directly on the products of the company or you have direct reports as well. In other words, you're in the line of authority. Staff positions in an organization in which people make recommendations to others, but who themselves are not involved in making decisions concerning the organization's day-to-day lawyers. So they're basically advisors. They could be, in fact, organizational psychologists that are giving information, they're a support structure to a manager. They might be lawyers. A lot of organizations actually will have designations between staff and management. Staff positions are not in the line of command, but often are fairly prestigious positions, while M or manager positions are usually line positions. So how you'd see this on an organizational chart is illustrated in the following slide. And basically it means that if there's arrows going above you or below you in a vertical, you're in a line position. If your position is off to the side with a horizontal line, you're most likely in a staff position, and that's how we illustrate that in an organizational chart. The final thing I want to talk about is decentralization, and of course, the reverse of that, centralization. The extent to which authority and decision making are spread throughout all levels of an organization rather than being reserved exclusively to top management. So, a decentralized organization, at every level, there's a fair amount of authority and decision making that can stop at that level. In other words, they don't need to ask permission above them for every decision they make. The more centralized an organization is, the more that those levels of management do not have the authority. In other words, all they do is channel decisions upwards up to a point where it can be made and then communicate that decision back downward. So when we look at decentralization versus centralization, basically low decentralization, which is high centralization, eliminates the additional responsibility not desired by people performing routine jobs. So again, there is advantages and disadvantages to both of these. There are situations where people don't necessarily want authority. If something goes wrong in what I do, I want management to tell me what I should be doing. I don't want that authority. And it also permits crucial decision making to be made by individuals who have a bigger picture. So when we look at highly centralized organizations, decisions are being made at a very high level and are simply being communicated downward through the organization. We're looking at an organization where decisions take longer, but also are more likely to be made looking at the big picture. When we look at high decentralization or low centralization, so basically high decentralized organizations, we can eliminate levels of management, making a leaner organization. We usually see decentralization as a flatter organization, and it does promote greater opportunities for decisions to be made by the people closest to the problems. So again, you can kind of start to think about when this works and when this doesn't. But we can also easily identify this as we look at an organization. The taller the organization is, the more levels of management, the more likely that organization is a highly centralized organization. The flatter the organization is with less levels of management, the more likely it is a decentralized system of decision making. So as always, if you have some questions, feel free to put your questions in the discussion chat on Canvas, and I will talk to you in the next module.